Today's lesson has to do with multiplying, dividing radicals. And so we're going to look at problem number 1. I'm going to go ahead and move that up. And the question is, can you simplify the product of the radical expression? And you notice that you have the third root of 6 times the square root of 2. This is called an index. This is called an index. And if they're not the same, then you're not able to simplify. So the answer to this would be no. No, you can't simplify. In contrast to number for B, we have the third root of -4, and we have the third root of 2, and you notice that both indices are the same, the index are the same. So what you have is you have the third root of the product of -4 times 2, which gives you the third root of -8. And remember that -8 can be written as -2 to the third power. And you know that, notice that the index and the power are the same. So when you get the cube roots of -2 to the third power, it's just going to be -2. So if you want to check in the calculator, we're going to go to Calculate, New, and we're going to type in the cube root. So you write cube root, and then we know that it's going to be the product of -4 times 2, and this is what you get -2. This is actually problem 2. What I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify this, and we have the cube root of 54 times x to the 5th. We're going to get 54, and I would do prime factorization. What I would say is, how many times does 2 go into 54? And you notice that 2 times 27 gives you 54. Now we know that 2 doesn't go into 27, but we know that 3 goes into 27. It's going to be 3 times 9. And then we know that 9 is going to be 3 times 3. So what I would do is I would write this using factorization. So we have 2 times 3 to the 1, 2, 3 third power. And we have x to the 5th, which is the same thing as saying x to the 3rd times x to the 2nd. So I'm going to rewrite it. So we have the third root, and we have 2 times 3 to the 3rd times x to the 3rd times x to the 2nd. We can get the cube root of 3 to the 3rd, it's 3. We can get the cube root of x to the 3rd, that's x. Whatever we can't get the cube root of, we leave it inside the radical. So we have 2x squared. So the cube root of 54x to the 5th simplifies to 3x cube root of 2x squared. For problem 3, we're going to simplify the product. But first, I'm going to simplify 72x to the 3rd y squared. Remember that the index here, it's square root, so that's 2. That's 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do prime factorization with 72. That's 2 times 36. That's 2 times 18. That's 2 times 9. And that's 3 times 3. Okay, so for 72, we figured out it's going to be 2 times 2 times 2, which is actually the square root of 2 to the 3rd power, times 3 to the 2nd, times x to the 3rd, times y to the 2nd, times the square root. We have 2 times 5 times x times y to the third power. So what we have here is 2 to the third times 2 to the second to the first is 2 to the fourth times 3 to the second, and we have x to the third times x, which gives us x to the fourth, times y to the fifth. So we have 2 to the fourth. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 squared times 2 squared times 3 squared times x to the second times x to the second, and this is y to the second times y to the second times y. And the reason why I did that is because the index is 2, and I can find the square root of anything that is to the second power. So this would be 2 times anything. This will be, it's going to be 2 again. And then we have 3, right? And then we have the square root of x squared, which is x. The square root of x squared, which is x. The square root of y squared, which is y. The square root of y squared, which is y. So we got the square root of 2 squared. We got the square root of 2 squared. We got the square root of 3 squared. We got the square root of x squared and x squared, and we got the square root of y squared. And we're missing the 5, so it's 5 times 5. So it's going to be the square root of y times 5. So we have 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 3 is 12. So it's 12x squared y squared times the square root of 5y. Number 4, we're dividing radical expressions, and we know that we have the square root of 18, x to the fifth divided by 2x to the third. So we're going to simplify 18 divided by 2, and then we have x to the fifth divided by x to the third. Square root 18 divided by 2 is 9. X to the fifth divided by x to the third is x to the second. So the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of x squared is x, so that's what it simplifies. Okay, we have the cube root of 54. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a prime factorization tree. So 2 times 27 gives you 54. 3 times 9 gives you 27. And then you have 3 times 3, which gives you 9. So I'm going to rewrite this in terms of powers of 3. So we have 2 times 3 to the third power times y to the third power. And we know that the cube root of 3/3 is 3. We know the cube root of y/3 is y. So you have the cube root of 2. So the cube root of 54 y/3 simplifies to 3y cube root of 2.